All right, so the first thing that we're going to want to do is open up Photoshop to do this. To open up Photoshop, we're going to simply press the Start button down on our keyboard, and you should see it right here. You should see something that says Adobe Photoshop CC 2019. If you don't see that, you can also just type in, if you press the Windows key, you should be able to type in something down here where it says type into search, and you could just type in PHO. And if you type in PHO, the first entry that should show up is Photoshop. So that's how you can find it real easy. You can simply press the Windows key and then type in PHO, and you should see Photoshop pop up. So we're going to open up Photoshop. You should see all the previous projects you worked on. For now, we don't really need to do any of this stuff. We're going to create our new document. So I'm going to click up here on Create New. What kind of document am I going to create? I'm going to create the 1,000 pixel grid. So that's the same one that we used last time. You should see right here, if you created the last assignment, it should say 1,000 pixel grid. If you haven't done that yet, you can go up here to Art and Illustration, and then click on the 1,000 pixel grid, and that will give us the 1,000 pixel grid template. Before we make our template though, right here where it says Preset Details, we want to change the name of this. I'm going to call this PS03 Ultimate Meal. There we go. So that's what I'm going to name this project so I can find it easily in the future. You don't really have to worry about the orientation or anything like that. You just want to have 1,000 pixels to play around with, and that's all you need to do. Now you can press Create, and you should see just a blank white canvas. All right, let's talk about the brush tool. If you press the B key on your keyboard, that is for the brush. And when you press the brush, you can also alternatively click over here where it shows a little brush, a paintbrush. You can click on that, and that will give you the brush tool. Now let's talk a little bit about the brush tool. There's a few things that are important for you to know. First of all, if you go over here to the top area of Photoshop, you'll see that there's a toolbar. If you click up here where there's a little entry right here, you can change the size of your brush, and you can change the hardness of your brush. Now the size of your brush is simply how big it is on the canvas. If I were to draw something here, you can see that this is a regular size brush here. Also, if you don't want to go up here and click on the toolbar up here, you can also just right click with the brush tool on the canvas, and it'll show you that same menu. Now the hardness, we're going to talk about hardness here. If I drag this down to 0% hardness, you're going to see what the difference between a hard brush and a non-hard brush is. Let's check it out. We can see that a hard brush here, you can see all the hard edges here. And a soft brush, or a brush that doesn't have much hardness, kind of has this soft feathered effect around the outside of it to where it just kind of blends in. It's almost like it's spray paint. That's kind of how it looks. So that's how you can change the hardness of your brush and also the size. You simply right-click on the canvas, and you'll see that these two sliders appear for you to be able to change the size or the hardness. Now, if you wanted to change your brush to be bigger or smaller, you could change the size right here, but a shortcut key for this is on your keyboard. The square brackets allow you to change the size of your brush. If you wanted to have a small brush or a big brush, you could press the two square brackets on your keyboard to change those sizes. The square brackets are just above your Enter key and just below the backspace key right here on the keyboard. So if I wanted to have a small brush, I could do that. And if I wanted a larger brush, I can do that as well. So this is how you can change the size of your brush fairly easily. Also, if you right-click, you can change the hardness of your brush to make it a hard or a soft one. All right. You'll also notice that there's already some custom brushes that you can play around with. If you go in here, you can sort through and see the different brushes that are already defaults. For this project, you don't need to use any of these custom brushes. You could just use regular old brushes. All right, so we talked a little bit about the brush tool. Let's talk about the eraser tool. So the eraser tool is the E. If you press E, it will be the opposite color of whatever you picked or the second color that you picked. Now this is very important. Something interesting to note about Photoshop, especially brush tools, is that you actually can work with two different colors pretty commonly. How do we pick colors to work with in Photoshop? If you look up here in the top right, you'll see something that looks like a little color rainbow here, and then a color swatch up here. So the way that you choose a color in Photoshop is you simply pick which color of the rainbow you want to use. So I'll say green, And then you get to choose the brightness or the hue of that particular color. So if I wanted a dark green, I could choose this. If I wanted a light green, I could choose over here. So this is how you choose what color you want. Now, something to note. Over here on the left side of where color is, it shows you these two boxes. This is your foreground color and your background color. You basically, this is what you brush with, and this is what you erase with. Also, if you want to switch these two colors, you press X on the keyboard. If I press X on the keyboard, you'll notice that these colors swap. They switch. So basically, I can choose two colors. If I want a dark green and a slightly lighter green, I could do that right here. I could have it to where I have two different colors that I can paint with. And to switch between them, I can press the X key, and that will swap between those two colors. Also, something for you to know, the brush tool paints with the color that's in front right here, or what is known as the foreground color. And what's behind it here is the background color. So if you press X, it will switch between those two colors. You can choose whichever ones you would like to work with on this project. Now what I want to do is I want to create a plate to put all of my food on. That's going to be the first thing I do. By the way, if you wanted to set your colors back to the default colors, which are black and white, you could press D on the keyboard, and that will change your colors back to black and white. So if you wanted to have your colors back to black and white, you just press D on the keyboard, and it will show black and white. Now let's say I wanted to put a plate down here on my background. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to click on the gray. I'm going to make my plate kind of gray here. So I'm going to choose my color first. I chose gray, and I could just paint it if I wanted to. However, I know that I want my plate to be a perfect circle, and I'm not very good at drawing perfect circles. So I'm going to show you how you can draw perfect squares and circles. Up here on the top left, you're going to see something just underneath the Move tool that looks like a square. This is the rectangular marquee tool, and if you hold down the mouse button over the top of this marquee tool, you can choose to make it a circle instead of a square. So I'm going to choose the circle here, so I can make a circle on my background here. So I chose the elliptical marquee tool, and now if I click and drag on the canvas, you'll see that it makes a circle. Now this is one of the most important parts about Photoshop is selection. You'll notice that when I made this selection or I dragged this circle, it's making this kind of like marching ants. It looks like there's a bunch of ants that are marching in a line. This means that everything inside of it has been selected. And that means that I can mess around with anything. I can play around with the pixels inside of this circle, but anything outside of the circle will not be affected. So if I use my brush tool now and I try to paint, it will only paint inside of that circle. I can't paint outside of it. It won't let me. I've selected the area that I want to have editable, and everything outside of that area cannot be affected. So this is how I can draw my plate. I can make a little circle and just make it a little bit darker. If I wanted to, I could make another circle and draw it inside. Now, something that's important for you to know, if I have a selection already laid out, like let's say I have this area selected, if I want to draw in this area outside of that selection, I have to deselect this area. The way that you can do that is if you have the marquee tool selected, that is you have this tool right here. If I have that selected, I can right-click and go to Deselect, and that will deselect what I have selected. That's a way I can do it. Alternatively, I could press Control and D to deselect. That also works. Or if I want to, I could also click on the Select area up in the menu. I can click on Select and then Deselect. Any one of these will work. This is how you can deselect an area that you've already selected. Otherwise, I won't be able to draw in any of the other areas. So I have my plate down here. I'm actually going to make a little bit wider of a section of plate. I'll give you a little shortcut key that works with the marquee tool. If you hold down Alt while you click and drag a marquee, it will pull it from the center it'll pull your selection from the center of where you're pointing instead of the corner. If I don't press anything and I drag, it drags from the top left corner. But if I drag from the middle, if I hold down Alt, I can then drag from the center of my circle, which might be more helpful for creating some types of selections. Now you'll notice after you've made the selection, you can actually click and drag that selection around. So I can put it right where I want. And now I'm going to brush a slightly lighter color on here. So you can see that I have two different colors. There we go. So I've got my plate ready. Now, in order to get full credit on this assignment, you need to make 5 different layers. I'm going to show you how you can make your layers. This background layer is my ideal eating spot. It's my plate. However, you can see down here in my layers that it is my background layer. What I want to do is I want to add a layer to where I can paint something on top of this plate. To make a new layer, if you look down in the layers area, there's right next to the trash can, there's what looks like a little piece of paper that's being folded up. When you click on that, that creates a new layer, and you're going to see it show up on top of the layer that you just made, or the background layer here. So this is a new layer, and you'll notice that it's like a checkerboard, a gray and white checkerboard. What that means is that it is transparent. It's like it's totally invisible and see-through. What I'm going to do is I'm going to think of what I want to put on this layer, and I'm going to name the layer that. So to do that, I'm going to double-click on the text of the layer right here, and I'm going to change what its name is. I'm going to say taco because I'm going to put a taco down here. Okay, so I named my layer to taco. In order to get full credit on this assignment, you have to name each one of your layers over here. So make sure you do that. I've named my taco layer, and now I can draw a taco on here. I'm just going to make my brush really hard. There we go. And I'm going to change the color of it, pick kind of a taco color, and I'm just going to click. There we go. So now I have my taco shell here. And if I use the move tool, that is I click over here and I click on the little arrows up here, I can then click and move that taco around, and it's not dependent on the layer below it. It's a layer that is to itself. I can resize it just like we did with our pictures before. And if I wanted to, I could turn it, although this is a circle, so turning it doesn't really do a whole lot. So there we go. I have the ability to move this around on the plate however I like. However, I want to put some stuff on top of this taco. I just have the tortilla basically here. So I'm going to create a new layer down here in our layer section. I'm going to click on this little piece of paper again. When I do that, it creates a new layer. And so right here where that layer is, I'm going to click on its name. I'm going to double click on that name, and I'm going to put taco meat. And I'll actually rename this one so it's the taco tortilla. There we go. So now I have just the taco tortilla. I'm going to click on this layer, and I'm going to draw my taco meat on there. So now I'm going to go in, grab my brush tool. I'm going to pick the color that I want to use. There we go. And I'll just draw some meat in here. There we go. And let's say I wanted to draw some more things on there. The reason why we're going to create a new layer is now I can move this around. So if I didn't like the placement of it, I can move it around a little bit. I can turn it. And I'm just going to basically add a new layer on top of this and add each one of my fixins. I could put my tomatoes. I could put cilantro. I could make a layer for each one of those things. And this is all you really got to do to add each layer of your meal here. You need to have 2 entrees. You need two entrees, 2 sides, and a drink. You need at least 5 layers. All of the layers have to be renamed, so make sure that you rename these layers. And lastly, you need some text on top of it. So I'm just going to put in a text layer. I'm going to put tacos. How did I do that? I just used the text tool. You can press T to access that tool, or you can select the capital T that's over here on the left-hand side here. So then after I've written it, I can use the move tool, and I can move that text around. So this should give you most of the tools that you need to complete this process. With your text, you do have to have a stroke and an outer glow. So I'm going to double-click not on the name of the layer that I want to have that effect, but right next to it. Over here on the side, if you double-click over here right next to where the name is, then you can add that stroke effect like we did for our previous assignment, and you can add the outer glow. So if I add stroke, usually you want it on the outside, and you can change the color of your stroke. So you can make it to where it has a little bit of an outside glow to it. That works. And this is where you can change the size of that stroke. So you want it to have some kind of stroke along the outside. You want it to have an outer glow. I'm going to make this an outer glow here. Yeah. So this is pretty much all the tools you're going to need to complete this. You're going to need 2 entrees, 2 sides, and a drink. You're going to want to just create a new layer for each one of the entries that you have. You're going to want to try to create your ultimate meal, and you're going to save it as a JPEG and a PSD, just like all the other assignments that we had in this class. All right, I hope you enjoy having fun with this project, and I will help you out each individually.